Welcome to the e-commerce Badassery podcast, the place for scrappy female entrepreneurs who want to learn actionable steps and strategies to grow the traffic, sales, and profit in your e-commerce business. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster, a 20-year retail veteran who spent 3 years as the only employee of a 7-figure online store. That shit was crazy. I know exactly how it feels to do all the things, and I'm sharing everything I learned the hard way so you don't have to. I may have started this business by accident, but supporting badass bosses like you lights me the fuck up, and I am so stoked to see you grow. Are you ready, babe? Let's roll. Hello, friend, and welcome back to the e-commerce Badassery podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. We've got another short and sweet episode today where my goal is to make sure this important topic is on your radar. I am not a privacy professional and I don't have all the answers. Truth be told, the extent of my experience implementing the requirements is limited to gathering all the necessary information for a privacy professional and legal team to craft the necessary documents. But I have noticed there isn't a lot of conversation around this, so I want to make sure everyone knows it's a thing. And while you may not be required to comply today based on the size of your business, it's something you need to keep your eye on because the more digital our world becomes, the more rules and regulations that will keep popping up. So what does this mean? This episode is here to bring this topic to light and encourage you to do your own research and due diligence. If you already have and you know where you stand and you're keeping up with all the changes, awesome. I'll see you in the next episode. If you have no idea what I'm talking about or haven't given this a second thought, keep listening. You should already know that you need to have a privacy policy on your website. This privacy policy tells your website visitors what information you collect about them, how it's collected, why it's collected, how the information is used, who will have access to it, how the website visitor can opt out of having this information collected about them, how they can review or update the information, what measures you're taking to protect that information, the effective date of the policy, and who to contact in your organization about the policy. For a long time, that was the standard. But in the last few years, 2 big laws went into effect that took things to the next level. First was GDPR in the EU, and then CCPA in California. Side note, in our most recent election here in California, there was a ballot measure to expand the privacy laws in California called the CCPR, which did pass. I don't know many details about it, but know that more requirements are coming. The thing to note about these is that while GDPR and CCPA look and sound similar to each other, there are some differences between them. So just because you're compliant with one doesn't necessarily mean you're compliant with the other. And of course, which ones you have to comply with depend on where your customers are and other thresholds for who is responsible to comply according to the laws. Note, by the way, that I said where your customers are, not where you are. So just because you don't live in the EU doesn't mean you don't have to comply with GDPR. If you sell to customers there, you do. And the same is true for CCPA in California. Now, just like the requirements for collecting sales tax that I talked about in last week's episode, there are thresholds for who is actually required to comply with the CCPA law. There are 3 conditions that if you meet at least one of them, you are required to comply. And they are, you have an annual gross revenue of $25 million. You buy, receive, sell, or share personal information for commercial purposes of 50,000 or more consumers, households, or devices annually, or you receive half or more of annual revenues from selling consumers' personal information. Now, it's unlikely if you're listening to the podcast that you're doing $25 million a year in revenue. If you are, amazing. Please message me so I can bring you on as a guest on the show. And as an e-commerce business, it's not likely you're receiving more than half of your annual revenue from selling information. But requirement number 2, 50,000 consumers, households, or devices. That device piece is what gets a little tricky. A device is defined as any physical object that can connect to the internet. So that can be a desktop computer, a laptop, a cell phone, all of which would count as a separate device. But then again, CCPA only protects California residents. So with all of that said, it's likely that you're not technically required to comply. With GDPR, compliance doesn't have a threshold. It's based on intent. So GDPR, because it protects consumers located in the EU, means that anyone who offers goods or services to customers or data subjects, as they call them, in the EU, whether or not it's connected to a payment, is required to comply. It's a little confusing, honestly. Now, as a small business doing a few $100,000 or a few $1 million a year, are you likely to be prosecuted and fined for not complying? Probably not. Enforcement is happening with big tech giants like Facebook, Google, and WhatsApp. So why are we talking about this on the show? Because the rules and regulations of data privacy are changing rapidly, and they will continue to do so more and more as businesses continue to move online. And so far, the rules being implemented in the US are at the state level, but it's possible that will change. And ultimately, I want you to be aware and as prepared as possible. And two, because as consumers become more aware of their privacy and data on the internet, and more breaches come from the big guys, the more weary those consumers will become. And knowing that you give a shit about them, their data, and their privacy is just one way you can instill confidence with your consumers and set your business up for future success. So, what should you do today? First thing, do your own research because I'm not a privacy professional. Got to make sure I get that disclaimer in there. Secondly, make sure you have a solid privacy policy in place at a minimum. If you really want to be sure, get a consultation with a privacy professional who can help you figure out when and if you might need to be compliant. The IAPP, which is the International Association of Privacy Professionals, is a nonprofit organization that helps define, promote, and improve the privacy profession globally, so you might want to find someone that's a part of that group. And ultimately, stay in the know. Just like states worked their way to catch up with the times of online sales and enacted new laws to recoup lost sales tax revenue, it's likely they may pop up with their own privacy rules, and there are some states already thinking about this, like Nevada. Theirs might actually be in place already, New York, and some other states. People are going to start following in California's footsteps. And eventually it may reach a federal level, which honestly, as a small business owner, it'd be so much easier if it was just at a federal level, because then you just had one rule to comply with versus all these different ones for all these different states with all these different thresholds. And check the show notes for some links and resources to get you started on this privacy journey. So that is our show for this week. Same time, same place next week. I hope you're having a kick-ass day, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're looking to surround yourself with more product entrepreneurs who totally get your life right now, get your booty on over to the e-commerce Badassery Facebook group. Can't wait to see you there. Until next time, e-commerce friends, stay badass.